Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. And we're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day now with Bernice Lee from Chatham House and Chairman and Founding Director of the climate change think tank E3G, Tom Burke. Good evening to both of you. Nice to see you both. So first of all, a standoff is brewing. Vladimir Putin has said that countries who want Russian gas must pay in rubles. Germany said the announcement by the Russian president amounted to blackmail. A very difficult situation for Western countries who are promising to wean themselves off Russian fossil fuels, but can't quite yet. So, Tom, first of all, what do you think the impact of this threat by Russia will be? Germany has said that it's going to carry on paying for the gas it imports from Russia in euros, as per its contracts, it says. But do you think this threat will make a difference to supply?
Well, it might make a difference to supply. It depends who's. There's a poker game going on. Mr. Ruble, Putin needs people to buy rubles in order to prop up the value of the ruble in Russia, and we need the gas. And it's now a question of who can look the other in the eye and call the bluff, in a sense. My guess is that this is just adding to the incentives and the pressures for Germany and the rest of Europe to get off Russian gas as fast as it possibly can. So my instinct is there's be a real temptation for them to call Mr. Putin's bluff. He's going to find it very difficult to go on financing his war if he loses the kind of income that he's getting from the gas. So I wish I knew the answer to that, because if you did, you could win a lot of money betting on it. But I honestly don't know.
Bernice, what's your take on this? I mean, these countries don't want to be paying in rubles. They don't want to be propping up the Russian economy. So what are their options? Some countries are really dependent on Russian gas, aren't they? Can they manage without it?
I mean, look, obviously, as Tom said, this is a brinksmanship game, and obviously no crystal ball. But we also know that what it really does do is to reinforce the idea that it is important that we get off Russian gas as soon as possible. We know that in the UK, for example, heat pumps and insulation would mean that we can get off the imports from Russian gas by, I think, 2027. And so it is indeed possible for some countries to actually get there relatively quickly.
But for others, harder, Tom. I mean, some will inevitably, won't they, think, well, what's the alternative? Maybe the alternative is increasing coal production. In fact, I think that's happened in some countries already. Do you think that's the option they're likely to take?
I think that is, and I think, quite frankly, that's a sensible thing to do in the circumstances, to do that. I think there'll be a lot of manoeuvring going on. Remember, we had in our own past periods when, during the coal miners' strike in the last century, we had to cut down our industry to operating several days a week instead of full time. And I think you'll see there are measures like that that will help. But yes, and I think we're going to go on seeing a use of coal. I think we'll see a much greater, that's the value of the EU. I think we'll see a much greater cooperation between countries to try and make sure that industries can go on operating and homes can go on having their lights on and their heating running. But I think there will be a real temptation on the part of Russia on the part of Germany, not to blink, and European countries, and actually to just take emergency measures to see us through what may well be a move in the right direction in any case.
Bernice Lee, do you think that the Russian invasion will end up with more fossil fuels being burnt in Europe?
I think at the moment, the worry is that it will definitely lead to a blip right now, as Tom said. At the same time, the direction of travel in the longer term has never been clearer. If we ever needed a reason to get off it as quickly as possible, looking at the multiple layers of blackmail, it is now. So it is actually time to obviously focus back efforts on scaling up renewable, improving efficiency, improving insulation, all the things we know we can do and we can do quicker too.
OK, let's move on to our next topic, which is not unrelated, and that shadow cast by the war in Ukraine stretches over here, of course, and renewable energy bosses here say that their industry can displace gas out of the UK's electricity grid entirely in 5 years. But then that does raise the question, what about transport? What about industry as well? Realistically, we'll need gas and oil for a very long time to come, won't we, Tom? I mean, first of all, this thing that they're talking about renewables replacing the need for gas as far as electricity generation is concerned within 5 years. First of all, is that doable, given that gas generates more than a third of our electricity at present?
I think it is doable to get gas out of electricity. And remember, in any case, the government has committed to us having decarbonised our power system by 2035. So that's just the kind of course we were already on, just accelerating that course to take us down. The thing that we really need to do that would make that even more possible is invest the money the government promised in the in its manifesto, the £9 billion for energy efficiency improvements, which it hasn't spent. If we were to do that, we'd make it even more possible for us to be confident that the renewable industry could get gas out of electricity in the time they're talking about.
But the picture is much bigger than that, as I was hinting in the introduction there, Bernice, isn't it? If we look at our overall energy consumption, including industry and transport, the vast majority comes from oil and gas, doesn't it? I mean, we're not going to phase that out anytime soon.
I mean, you know, if you look at offshore wind, I mean, 11 gigawatt currently, 8.5 in pipeline, 3 to 4 years. 40 gigawatt target by 2030. It will do a lot of the lifting. Electrification can do all of the lifting that we are talking about. But this is actually something that we can invest more in and looking forward to as well.
But what about those who say, isn't the obvious thing to do, Bernice, when you're looking at replacing Russian oil and gas, for example, is to just drill closer to home, drill in the North Sea?
So of the 6 oil fields that people are talking about, I think if 3 of them would produce, then probably they could sort of replace the, you know, the imports already by about 20. I think I mentioned earlier that heat pumps and insulation can basically replace it by 2027. But if they start producing, the 3 out of 6 that could produce is, I think, 2027 or something like that. So in other words, even if they did, it isn't actually, and full capacity would only reach by 2028. So it's not like even if you needed it, they could actually produce any faster. Electrification could provide.
Bernice Lee, Tom Burke, we're out of time. Thank you both very much indeed for your time this evening.